working for my dad with his work as an architect, I did a lot of little jobs for him in his business, shelves and shelves of carpet samples that I would organize for him, and he would pay me to do that. Different things that he let me do to help him in his job that really helped me appreciate some of the things that I was learning in school. Again, drawing that connection for me and making me excited about learning the next thing. The flexibility of the option of homeschooling, I mean, you can't really do that in any other education option, tie it in so well. I mean, there might be some opportunities to add on to learning, but not the way that you can with so much flexibility with homeschooling.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Zan podcast, where our goal is to help you thrive in your homeschool journey. Let me take just a minute to ask you to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen or watch, including YouTube. And if this podcast has encouraged you, please leave us a good review. Each review really helps. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram as well. This podcast is brought to you by BJU Press Homeschool. Homeschooling is an exciting adventure we take with our children. One of the most challenging parts of this journey is choosing the curriculum you want to use. BJU Press Homeschool is a curriculum you can trust. All the books, resources, and videos have been designed with you and your child in mind. Their curriculum is educationally robust and rich, taking into account that children have different learning styles, strengths, and needs. Mom, you are in charge. BJU Press Homeschool is here to come alongside and support you. Do you need help with the teaching load, or is there a subject you just don't want to teach? Their amazing video courses are available for all grades and almost every subject. BJU Press Homeschool believes that homeschooling can produce a new generation of students who know God, love their neighbors, and stand firm in their faith. For more information, go to bjupresshomeschool.com. That's bjupresshomeschool.com. I'm so excited to introduce our guest today, Nathan Pierce. He is a second-generation homeschooler, and he is the Executive Director of Family Protection Ministries and has been dedicated to promoting and preserving homeschool freedom now for over 20 years. He screens hundreds of bills annually, meets with legislators throughout the year, and also encourages and equips families to be involved civically. So, Nathan, thank you so much for being here with us today. We're so excited to have you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Nathan, tell us a little bit about when you were homeschooled and what it was like being homeschooled back in the day.
Well, as you know, Zan, things weren't always quite as friendly as they are in most of the country nowadays. So we had the routine of what to do if somebody knocked at the door: hide under the bed, climb out the bedroom window, things like that. But
now, did you live in California then, or where were you living?
I did. When I was young, we lived in Southern California in San Diego, a little town called Poway. And when I was in the early 80s, my mom actually sent my older sister to preschool for about a week before she realized, what am I doing? I've done a great job raising my kids until this age. Why am I sending them to someone else now? And so she kind of decided to one day just not take her in anymore. And so I was pretty small at that time, but that was kind of the beginning for our family. And we shortly started attending the CHIA conventions in Southern California. We actually started with the first CHIA convention in 1983.
Okay, now tell us what CHIA stands for those
Sure.
people who don't know. Okay.
CHIA is the Christian Home Educators Association of California. So it's a statewide organization that supports and protects private homeschooling in California and focuses on Christian homeschooling. And they started in 1982 and were supporting homeschool families at that time, which there were only a few at that time. So the events were very small. So when we started homeschooling, there weren't a lot of us, but there were enough to sort of connect with a few people in our area, which is what which is what my parents did. And so we had park days where we got together with other homeschool families. And actually, that was kind of the earliest connection that I had, even though I didn't really understand it, with homeschool advocacy, because even as soon as I could walk, I was handing out newsletters about homeschool advocacy at Park Day.
Right, right. That's amazing. That's amazing. So, did you homeschool from the time you were little up through high school?
Yes, I homeschooled all the way through, as did my 5 siblings. I went all the way through high school, and then I took a year off and worked for my dad, who was an architect. I was his office manager for about a year before I left for college. And then I went to the Master's College, now the Master's University in Los Angeles, and got my degree in political studies at that time. And met my wife there, my wonderful wife, Betsy, at the school at Master's. And we got married in 2004 and have our 8 children now, our clan. We just actually graduated our oldest. Was very exciting.
Those are exciting times.
So,
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go back just a minute. So I want you to tell me 2 or 3 of your favorite memories of homeschooling, or those things that meant the most to you, or that might have been in your mind as you decided to homeschool your own children.
Sure. So when I was little, we lived in Southern California, and my parents really wanted to move us to a place where we could have some property and to learn responsibility. And so we actually moved to the North Coast near Eureka, just south of Oregon, just outside of a town called Ferndale. And in that area, we had 20 acres, and I liked being outside. And when my mom was trying to get me to do math, it was often difficult, as with many young boys, to get me to sit still. And so she would send me outside to run laps. But one particular summer, I had started building a tree fort, and it had a little bridge over the creek, and I even built a drawbridge, and my mom even offered to pay for the hinges that I needed for my drawbridge so that I could pull up the bridge to keep the girls out. And that year, she allowed me to really learn a lot about building. And with my dad being an architect, I was always interested in how the next thing would get built, how to make it bigger, how to make it better. And she let me sort of explore that as part of my school. It didn't replace school, really. It just let me explore a lot of the things that I was learning in school. And I remember engaging with my mom and my dad about this building project that I was so excited about. And so it kind of helped me to see how some of the things in school, like math and measuring and cutting boards, would actually fit into real life. And I really appreciated the time that my parents spent in helping me to see the connection between the things I was doing in school with learning math and worksheets and learning to really communicate with people and explain what I wanted to the people down at the lumberyard, and really connect all those dots so that I could appreciate why I was learning what I was learning in school. Because I like I said, I didn't like sitting still in a seat, but when I could see the connection with how I could use what I was learning, it made me excited about it. And so that's probably the earliest example of really caring a lot about the education I was getting.
You know, that is really encouraging, because sometimes we're starting a new school year some people have already started. Certainly this month, most people will get started. I remember the good old days when you started school the Tuesday after Labor Day, which
Yep.
I'm a big fan of personally. But it's encouraging to know that all those things you do together as a family, it really foster a love of learning. And all that creativity and that mental space and the ability to explore outdoors is a vital part of our education. And now with recess being maybe 15 minutes a day in some schools and non-existent in others, it's just one of the great advantages to me of homeschooling.
Yeah. I definitely appreciated the flexibility that we had. When I was in high school, my parents let me start a wood business, a firewood business, and I even hired a couple of my homeschool buddies that were in our local group, and they helped me cut and split firewood, and then a friend that was one of the dads in our homeschool community helped me do the deliveries for our firewood business. And I always told all my friends I would never work in an office. I was always going to be an outdoors kind of person. But he was so willing to help me do these deliveries. But it was sort of a secret ploy from my parents, because this guy was the nuclear physicist that managed the decommissioning of the nuclear power plant in our neighborhood.
Whoa, so that's a heady position.
Yes. So he used a lot of math in his work. Math was not one of my strong points, so he helped me to see how he used math in his life. And then working for my dad with his work as an architect, I did a lot of little jobs for him in his business as I was growing up, organizing his samples of. He had all of these catalogs of samples, shelves and shelves of carpet samples that I would organize for him, and he would pay me to do that, and different things that he let me do to help him in his job that really helped me appreciate some of the things that I was learning in school. Again, drawing that connection for me and making me excited about learning the next thing. So all of these things that my parents really used to their advantage and to my advantage, the flexibility of the option of homeschooling. I mean, you can't really do that in any other education option, tie it in so well. I mean, there might be some opportunities to add on to learning, but not the way that you can with so much flexibility with homeschooling.
Yeah, that's amazing. If there's one word that to me sums up what makes homeschooling work so well, it's flexibility.
Yes.
We're not driven, as John Taylor Gatto said, from bell to bell and cell to cell. And, in a classroom. It's funny. I was speaking out in Wyoming, and I said, I said that because I firmly believe that. And this one guy was from Chicago. He said, "Zan, that is such a great quote, but I have to tell you, it took me a minute to figure out what bale to bale and sail to sail was." So I tried to enlist not a Southern accent in saying bell to bell and sail to sail, but I'm not sure I worked. So now I feel like I always need to explain that statement. So what led you to want to study, what was your major again? Political
studies, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Political studies. So you said you really started your love for freedom when you were a little boy handing out flyers. It sounds
Right.
like my sons, going to the legislature with me when they were 6 and 4 and 7 and 5.
Right.
And, tell me the process of your becoming actively involved in homeschooling freedom.
So, as I mentioned, growing up homeschooling, we had concerns about homeschool freedom. Obviously, we were always worried that somebody would come and challenge what we were doing. And as I got older, I understood more about the reasons behind why people were challenging homeschooling, what the worldview was coming from the other side saying, we don't like your worldview. And I grew up where, people, we all held very high the folks that were fighting for homeschool freedom, like Mike Smith, Mike Ferris. Roy Hansen started Family Protection Ministries.
I remember
here in
Roy
California.
so well. Yes. Uh-huh.
And all growing up, my mother actually edited Roy's newsletter. And so
I did not know that.
She was his editor. And as part of our education, some of our English assignments were editing Roy's newsletter. And so we would get some of these as tasks, and reading what was going on here in Sacramento was sort of a sort of a heavy thing to me. It really bothered me that people were attacking homeschool freedoms and the Christian worldview in general. But as I said, early in high school, in junior high, early high school, I definitely wanted to be outside and had that firewood business. But it kept feeling like I wasn't doing what God wanted me to do. There was something more, and that wasn't quite, it almost felt like I wasn't being obedient to pursue that. And so ultimately, it took debate in high school to open my eyes to realize that God could use me to do something else. When I was pursuing splitting firewood as a living, I felt like that was a good fit for me, and yet it didn't feel like it was really the completion of what God wanted for me. And yet I still felt like I couldn't attain to the level that I would need to attain to mentally to really do this kind of work. And then when I was doing debate in high school, being part of, back then it was HSLDA debate. And,
right. Okay.
And so in the mid to late 90s, I was part of that, and it really helped me realize that I could formulate arguments. I could engage with people about real issues that matter to me. And that's when I realized that there could be something else for me to do. And so I started pursuing that, and met a number of people here in Sacramento that were working on various conservative projects and conservative causes. And that led me to end up at Master's College studying political science. And it was actually my first fall. At that point, I still never anticipated working at Family Protection Ministries. It just seemed too high up for me. I pictured maybe working in a legislator's office, sort of just doing behind the scenes work. But I ultimately was asked by Roy, because I actually was the roommate of his son was my roommate my first year in college.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And so they asked me to come and intern my first year, and the rest is history, I guess. I never left after that.
That is amazing. So when did you take over full time for Roy?
It was about 2017.
Okay. So it's been about 7 years.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So, all right, let's back up a little bit. And I want you to tell me about you and Betsy and having 8 children and what it's like to have a big family.
Well, it's interesting. I had 5 siblings. My wife had 4 siblings. There were 5 of them in their family. There were 6 of us kids in my family. So when Betsy and I met in college, we both had a homeschooling background. We actually met in the handbell choir. Betsy's a math person. She was a math major in college. I'm kind of the opposite.
Right.
So we actually met in the handbell choir, which was the only thing we had in common at the school. So we really enjoyed.
I love playing handbells. Yes, I just love handbells.
It's
what
great.
A thing to have that choir in college. Yes.
Yes. So we really enjoyed that time, and as we got to know each other, we realized that we had a lot of goals in common for what we wanted for our future. And so our idea about homeschooling and having 8 kids or a big family was something that we talked about well before we ever got married. And we even, I think, pretty much wrote out our educational philosophy before we got married. So it was definitely something that God put on both of our hearts before we were together as a married couple. And so God really steered us in that direction very early on. And I'm really grateful for that, because it's really helped us to have a united vision in what we want to do with our family. And it really was a lot of the people that were around us as we both grew up that helped us to have that vision. And a lot of the people that I grew up around, going to homeschool conferences and hearing things over and over again, that helped solidify in my own mind that this is what God wants for the family. God wants parents to raise their children to love God, and to show their kids how to follow God in every area of life. I keep going back to Deuteronomy 6, where he talks about, parents teaching their children these things about loving God and doing that in every area of life. No matter what you're doing, we need to live out loving God and showing that to our kids.
When Joe and I were in college, it was like the late 70s, 73 to 77. And the family movement was just, with James Dobson and others, was just beginning to come on the scene. And Joe and I were really involved in several Bible studies on campus together. And we had some guest speaker come in. And I remember him. I don't remember anything he said. But Joe was a freshman in college, and he remembered him saying, if Christian parents would just raise their own children to love the Lord, disciple their own children. Now, he had some mathematical formula about when the Great Commission would be reached and all of that. But, he said it would revolutionize the church. And Joe and I Joe remembered that. And you and I were talking earlier on your podcast about somebody can have a leadership or influential relationship in our lives and not invest a lot of time. That one statement totally changed Joe's life. And was just that one statement gave us a foundation to build on in terms of, we wanted a family when we got out of school and got married, and we wanted our children first and foremost to love Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so it's so sweet to hear you talk about it, because our vision was, we had never heard of homeschooling. We didn't know anything about Christian education, and all of these things were just on the cusp of really beginning to happen in the culture. And so it's really special for me to hear how you and Betsy, were able to stand really on the shoulders of your parents and have that vision, more fully formulated. It also reminds me, Joe's been reading a book or listening to a podcast by Tim Keller. Obviously he recorded it before he died, on marriage. And one of the things he says is you need to marry your best friend. And it sounds like you and Betsy did that. Joe and I did that. We're coming up on our 47th anniversary here. Oh, and so many times I've thought, I'm so glad we're still best friends.
Yeah.
So that's really amazing. So y'all got married. Did you have kids right away?
We did, and we struggled actually at the beginning, because we knew we wanted to have kids right away. We had a couple of miscarriages at the very beginning, but God really blessed us and brought our local church around us, which we were both living away from our families when we got married, because Betsy's family is from the Palm Springs area. I was from up near Eureka, so about 7 hours away driving from both of our families. And so God used a lot of things right at the beginning of our marriage to really bring us in tight with our local church here. And they came around us, and when our first daughter Abby was born, it was just an incredible thing, and now we have 8 kids. So God's really blessed us.
That's really amazing. Thank you for joining Nathan and me today for part 1 of this 2-part episode. If you want to get in touch with Nathan, you can find him at fpmca.org. It's Family Protection Ministries of California, fpmca.org. And you can find me at zantyler.com and on social media. May God continue to bless you and your family as you homeschool. And until next time, bye.